everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Proud to Work in Cannabis podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Humiston, the founder of LeafLink's, and I've been really looking forward to this episode because I have two great friends on today. We have Ryan, who is the co-founder and executive chairman at LeafLink, and we have Artie, who is the president and CEO at LeafLink. We're going to have a really exciting conversation about startup phase of LeafLink, scale-up phase of LeafLink, the industry as a whole. It's going to be a great conversation. So thanks so much for tuning in. And Artie and Ryan, thank you for being here. How are you guys?
Doing well.
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Let's start out, Ryan, with you. Can you give us a little bit about your background and what in the world ever made you decide that you thought it was a good idea to start a business in the cannabis industry?
At this point, we've been building for a number of years, and it was back to 2015. I just started and sold another technology company in a different regulated space. We had sold to a very traditional, pretty old school holding company. Not a lot of innovation happening there. I'd always loved marketplaces. Business to consumer marketplaces, was selling things online from a super young age, and was curious how there weren't more business to business marketplaces. That was interesting. And in 2015, 2016, we started seeing Colorado, Washington State going legal. And is there an opportunity to define this industry before it even needs to be disrupted with business to business technology? We saw a lot of customers that were just totally underserved by anything off the shelf. They couldn't use name brand solutions that everyone else takes for granted. And we wanted to come in and support them, really build up this online community that we've now done, half of all wholesales on the platform. And we really are focused on empowering retailers to be the best retail experience, brands to be the best brands. And on LeafLink's marketplace, they could find each other, and we help support them do everything else along the way with the community that we now have on LeafLink platform.
So backing up a little bit to 2015, you decided that you were interested in this industry, you were interested in marketplaces. How did you literally go about taking this from an idea to getting your first customers in Colorado? A lot of people listening to the show have aspirations to build something, to be an entrepreneur. Like, what does it take to go from that idea to actually getting your first customer? And what was that journey like at LeafLink?
We were really in a fortunate position coming off of the last company we sold that we had $1 million from investors ready to go again. It was like whatever Ryan and my co-founder Zach were working on, they were ready to support. We didn't even have a product, but the way we got our first customers was, one of our closest advisors in New York had a cousin who lived in Denver, who was friends with a guy that ran an awesome brand in Colorado. And so we just went out and met with them. We were staying at basements of Airbnbs, some places you probably keep all your clothes on when you go to sleep at night, just saving every dollar we could, and living in the warehouse with our first customer in Denver, just to understand what they had to deal with from the moment an order comes in to the moment it's delivered to their end user. So this would be the retail shop. And from there, we did ride-alongs with their sales team. We went to industry events, a lot of cold calls, a lot of cold emails, a lot of persistence, nothing really beautiful or easy about it. It was just, a lot of hard work and being in person with the customer from day one.
It's funny that you just told that story because last week we had the folks from Trim on, and they were talking about same thing. They just basically lived with their customer, and they didn't even completely know what their solution out of the gate was, but they spent so much time being with the customer. And I think that's such a great tip for people that are trying to start a business. Don't come out with the exact solution. Go spend time with the customer and figure out exactly what it is that they need. Ryan, what in the early days surprised you about, maybe what you thought the problem was versus what the actual problem was? In the early days when you were living with those customers, what was the biggest surprise?
To what you said, though, I think you're right. You're either there or you have nothing. And I think that's how you build very early on. And some of the challenges that we saw, we expected when you walk into a facility and you see a bunch of people kind of buzzing around and they create an amazing product at the end of the day, and you look behind the curtain, it's pretty amazing how they were stitching together and running their businesses on text messages, Google Sheets. They weren't using all these sophisticated solutions that existed in other verticals at all. And so for us, it was like, all right, well, we have this marketplace idea, but it sounds like when you get an order from your sales team, they are texting the fulfillment team who are putting it on a whiteboard with like blue painter's masking tape to break down the cells of what accounts are that they need to make that day. Maybe we should put that online. And they're like, yeah, maybe we should. Like, all right, so Zach, my co-founder, code that up and let's get it in their hands and let's just start helping them internally. And then we'll go to the retailer and get some orders going. But it was really like meeting them where they were because they had even less than we thought. And speaking to other verticals, I think that's the case too. Like much more mature industries are still doing things in a really inconsistent, inefficient way. And that's, I think, an awesome entry point for a solution like ours.
I remember one of the first times we met, you showed me a picture of like someone's office, and it was literally like all their orders manually written out on a whiteboard. And it was just like so shocking that that's how they were going about doing it. And then I remember you, and I'd love for you to, you don't have to tell the name of this person, but so you kind of came up with a solution. Obviously, it doesn't make sense to have orders written on whiteboards, and you started pitching some people, and some people told you, oh, this will never work. This will never work. We're gonna keep writing on whiteboards. Can you kind of talk about some of those early doubters and how later on they actually wanted to invest?
It was really important, and everyone in this industry is so proud of what they do. They really love the product, or they really love the community, or they really love their customers or patients. And so for us, coming from New York, it was important to put as much physical time literally with them as we could to demonstrate that we were there to be their partner. And I think once we got over the hump that we're fully invested in this, we are going to be here to support you. We're not going anywhere. And now it's been 7 years of servicing, the majority of the industry. I think we've really won over that level of trust and relationship with customers. But yeah, in the beginning, people always thought, oh, like there's all these fly-by-night people that come into cannabis, think they're going to make a bunch of money here, call it a day, and that's the story. We always knew, and we always said this is going to be a long slog. It really is, and it has been that way for a lot of people. I think a lot of people won't make it to the other side, but we're your partner, and we'll be here, and we'll do everything we can to make sure you're there too. And that was part of how I think we won them over.
So, of course, obviously it's been now 7 years. It's been a lot has happened since you won those first early customers. Can you talk to us a little bit about getting from those initial customers to getting to a true seed round? And for people that are sort of pre-seed, they do the angel round, friends and family, they need to get from that stage to actually being able to attract legitimate investors in. What needs to happen in that time? And, is there any learnings that you took from that period of time?
Simple goals and clear definitions of success. So for us in the first 5 years, like there were three things we cared about: GMV, so the number of transactions on the marketplace; how many buyers, so retailers; and how many sellers we signed up. That was the only thing we ever talked about, and that was internally how we ran the business. We had goals set to that. Externally, for investors, it was around scalability. So we started the first angel round was like, let's see if this idea works in the only market that exists, Colorado. And if you believe, as we do, that this market will grow to other states, we're going to need more money to take it from Colorado to Washington, Oregon, and California. That's going to cost another $3 million. And then if it works in 4 states, we think it could work in 15. So we're going to open up in another 11, and that's the A round. And then the B round and the rounds that came after that were really, we can get to this later, more about monetizing the transaction. So how are we taking this whole volume and community we've built and then begin to give customers more of what they need, but also as a business begin to make money on the LeafLink's side too.
And so, Artie, during this time, Artie, we want to loop you into this. During this time, while Ryan and Zach and team are out there starting up, what were you doing in your career? Because, you certainly weren't in warehouses out in the cannabis industry. So what were you doing during this time?
Yeah. So my background is, subscription based, technology enabled services. And so, I grew up more in sort of the software technology, media spaces. I spent a lot of my career in the cable industry, which was probably specifically where I was when Ryan was sleeping in the basement with his clothes on in 2015, and then I went and I joined WeWork. My background is interesting. I'm obviously not a founder, but what I've done is I think Ryan is probably like, the fifth founder who I've worked with in my career. Media, cable, early days of the internet, there were a lot of, obviously founder-driven companies, and I was lucky enough to work with, some pretty amazing founders. And that has been sort of, I guess, a niche that I've been able to sort of carve out as like, okay, this founder has an awesome idea. They've built this business, and, how can I be helpful sort of taking it to the next level? I think, when I left Time Warner Cable, it was, again, if you think of cannabis, it was a state by state business. We competed locally, highly regulated, and, a lot of sort of local and national and regional complexities you needed to sort of deal with. And the more I spent time with Ryan, there was just like some weird sort of similarities to that industry. And, if you think about, again, sort of cable, you have content and you have distribution. So you think about, content is HBO and ESPN. The content in in the cannabis industry are brands. And then, frankly, how do you help, those brands basically succeed? You give them sort of great distribution, which we did in cable, and frankly, we can do through LeafLink today. And so when Ryan reached out to me, I was honestly kind of semi-happily semi-retired, doing some investing and advising. And, what interested me here was one, just Ryan and Zach. Like I just, really enjoyed the time I spent with them and thought they were just like amazing founders and what they had built. And, the opportunity to really help define the industry. I think, again, a lot of jobs you look at, you're trying to disrupt some other industry, where here it's like you're actually trying to define an industry that we know has, whether they're social and economic benefits of the industry. So that was what was most sort of compelling to me, like the people and the opportunity to define.
So Ryan, you reach out to Artie, you pull Artie out of semi-retirement to join, the easiest space of all time. Artie, when you got into LeafLink and you started really learning the cannabis industry, what was like the number one most surprising thing that you saw?
I think, for me, I think one of the things that I think the industry really needs to be successful is we should have basically, I think, a rising tide lifts all boats in the industry. I think that was one of the things we did really well in cable and cable TV. Like, we were rivals, but we were all growing our business together. I think at times and so business in that industry was not viewed as a zero-sum game. I think at times, the industry as it has evolved, who we sort of define as our rivals or the people we need to defeat or the things we need to do are actually not the things that I think are going to sort of benefit the industry and all of us. And so that's like something I would just love to see more happening in the industry, is just like, how do we all work together to, make sure this industry is on the path that it should be.
Ryan, when you reached out to Artie to bring him in, what exactly were you looking for, and how did you know that it was the right time in your business to bring in someone with Artie's background to help you take the business to the next level?
When Artie and I started talking, we were probably somewhere around 250 plus people, and we were hiring almost a person a day a little over a year ago. And the company was getting increasingly complicated, sophisticated, with layers of management and process operation requirements. And, although we kind of joke about the early days of LeafLink being with customers and understanding problems, I love those moments and those times. And I found that a lot of my schedule was back-to-back, meetings, one-on-ones, managing people or helping people that I thought, I could do a bunch of things. Other people could do certain things better that have run large organizations. Absolutely. And so we went out we're looking for like a COO president type role. And in the back of my mind, I thought if we could find someone amazing who's been down these paths before, can, help our team grow, help our customers have an even better experience as a result of that, that's a huge win. And so I was really excited to bring Artie on to do that. And then we're coming up on Artie's almost 1 year anniversary. I thought, well, if that works out really well in that role, could take on even more into the CEO position. And, as a result of a lot of the success that we've had with Artie here and, this new round coming in, just all made a lot of sense at this time to do that change and enter this next chapter, which I think is going to look very different from the first 6 or 7 years. But it becomes clearer every day now with some of the things that we've been working on internally at the business.
Yeah, I think it's like, I think founders, often are like, all right, where do I want to spend my time? And do I have, frankly, all the minutes and hours in the day to do that? I think, again, as I think about things that are really important for the industry now, I think, external facing is really important. There's a lot of things, on the regulatory front that impact the industry. And I think, obviously Ryan's been spending a bunch of time there, as well as, again, spending time with our customers as they, work through what's been a difficult time in the industry. I think also, frankly, I think given where the industry is now, I think you're going to see consolidation happen in the industry. And I think, again, one of the things, again, where Ryan's been, just spending a lot of time thinking about, we've been spending time together on, is just what does the chessboard start to look like in this industry, over the next 12 to 24 months. But I think, there's going to be consolidation. And, I think, again, one of the things we're excited about with our balance sheet and our round getting done is, we think there's some really interesting opportunities for LeafLink there.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. I think only cannabis company in 2023 to pull off any kind of round, let alone a $100 million round. So congratulations to both of you. What was the funding environment like? Of course, you guys have raised several rounds of financing from tier one investors, one of the only technology companies in the space to be able to attract tier one big funds. What was the environment like this last round in comparison to other rounds?
It was, from my side, it's always been challenging to raise capital in cannabis because the industry is federally illegal. So you immediately, right off the bat, half of funds can't write a check. So it's always been challenging. I'd say it was more challenging because of the way the public markets were. People didn't know how to price company rounds. There's a lot of change of opinion. LPs were getting more conservative, and so what we were able to do on our side is really lean in and work closely with existing and our closest partners, plus one or two new faces that we think are going to be strategic to some of the moves Artie's talking about, and pull together a really large round that we believe helps us do a couple things. but within it really creates this fortified balance sheet that gives us some exciting opportunity to deliver and continue to deliver for our customers, but also make the world a little bit simpler for them and pull together parts of what we see as this digital supply chain. So it was definitely more challenging. Very happy to be on the other side of it. But as I'm sure, Carson, when you're raising money, the thing you actually want to do the most is just like go back to actually working on the business. And that's where we are now. So it's better to be on this side than that side. But, excited we got through it.
Artie, from your perspective, given that you've raised in cannabis and outside of cannabis, I agree with Ryan. It's every time we kick off a round, we are starting with like 90% less potential investors just because of the state of the industry. So from your perspective, being involved in a cannabis fundraise versus other fundraise, what were the differences and what did you observe as your first time going through this?
Yeah, I think, look, there was just sort of two issues that came together last year. One was obviously just a major, slowdown in fundraising across all industries, given the macro environment and this drive to sort of profitability against a backdrop of, publicly traded growth equity was also getting sort of disproportionately hit. And so, as a result, I think cannabis was seen as like there were multiple things sort of going on. One is higher risk growth equity, which probably cannabis is perceived to be among the highest of risks, were sort of disproportionately hit, and so stocks were hit on the public side. That read through obviously to the private side as well. Safe banking got gummed up. And so as a result, I think where people really focused was in our round of like, what has been built here. And just, again, like I would just sort of say like that LeafLink's got really good bones as a company. Like there's some things that we've done really, really well. And again, some things like most companies that we didn't do as well, but they were just sort of like great bones with what had been created. And I think, again, where you'll see us like as a company taking it as like focusing on the things that we think we do really, really well. And, look, you don't get to 50% share in the marketplace without doing some things really well. And I think, again, as we've spent time with our customers on both the brand and the retail side, we think there's ways that we can, really improve their business, which will have a read through to our business. I think what a lot of companies had over the last few years is they had businesses and then they sort of took that core business they were good at, and then it led them into two or three other sort of quote unquote ancillary businesses that or they did mergers. And Ryan's, which I've sort of said to Ryan, like, some of these like Frankenstein mergers of two companies who are like maybe kind of okay at two different things. You sort of put those types of companies together. That's not gonna end well. And so again, for us, like when we see, the opportunity for consolidation or things in the space, it's going to be things where we're like, is this in our knitting? Like these are things that we actually think, going back to sort of like our core marketplace and other businesses, these are things that we can do. There's other parts of the ecosystem that frankly others can be awesome at. I think you just have to know what you're good at. And I think, again, when we spend time with our investors of sort of like our go forward plan, our go forward strategy, I think everyone was super aligned of like, okay, we get like this is the core operation, and getting alignment around then and then these are the areas we think we can play in, and then other areas where we're going to let others do that.
Yeah. So for people listening that may not be as familiar with LeafLink, what are the areas that you rock at, that you're the best at, that you're really planning on doubling down on to really help this industry grow over the next year? What are those areas that you guys just crush at? Because to your point, you didn't just get to 50% of the market share magically. You clearly delight customers in a lot of things that you do. What are those things?
Yeah. So the things that we've excelled at are really around this core function of purchasing and back office management of supply side, so brands and distribution companies. That's how we've built the liquidity in the marketplace. That's how we've gotten the market penetration that we have. And so it's really thinking around that purchasing activity. Who are the personas that spend the most time on it? And a lot of retailers, a lot of purchasing managers, a lot of owners, purchasing departments. Can we invest even more there? On the sell side, what tools are they using in addition to LeafLink that we could be working more closely alongside to give a consistent experience in how they're running the back office of their business. So for us, I think it's really around like our core asset has been the large community that we've built that are buying and selling and doing these orders on platform. And then what can we do to further support that and begin to add services on top of it along the way that don't distract us from that being the main lifeblood of what is LeafLink.
So right now it's been a little bit of a rocky road in cannabis. What are you guys sit at a place with an incredible amounts of data? What are you guys seeing from where you're sitting? I mean, as someone that owns a hiring company, our phone used to ring with people saying we're hiring 200 people, and now our phone rings with a large operator telling us they're laying off 200 people. So it's been, at least from the bank's perspective, there's been more firing than hiring going on. From the LeafLink perspective and the data that you all have, what are you seeing and what's your perspective on what's going on in the industry?
Yeah, look, I think there's definitely more shakeout that's going to happen in the industry this year, and I think again that led to one of the reasons we wanted to sort of have this war chest balance sheet was, okay, let's make sure that frankly we have a very clear path to profitability, which we do with a bunch of money left over. That being said, like there are green shoots in the industry. We have seen, frankly, pricing begin to stabilize in the industry. We have seen certain new states that have come on, like again, like in Missouri, that we're seeing like really healthy results from. There's more states that are going to come on later this year, and we think again, those should be very successful. So, look, this happens sometimes with industries where you sort of, people need to learn like, okay, we had too much supply and we needed to work through that, and pricing came down, and that had an impact on the overall industry. I think where you're going to see on the other side of this is just, I think there'll be a bunch of consolidation, and then I think companies will rationalize the things like that they are really, really good at. And, I think the thing about this industry is a lot of people have had to sort of vertically integrate out of necessity, and they do a bunch of different things just because no one else would frankly do them for them. I think, again, you'll start to see companies who say like, I'm going to be the best at this, and these other two or three things, I do more out of necessity. Maybe there's a company or a partner who I can use to frankly, have them do that, and we'll just, we'll focus on our knitting. That I think you'll see a lot more of that over the next sort of 24 months.
Ryan, what's your take on state of industry and what's to come over the next year?
I totally agree with everything that already put out there. And what I think we're seeing is, a space that for some investors is becoming pretty long in the tooth. Been, almost a decade that some of these states have been legal. And as a result, capital isn't going to come in as quickly as it used to, even when, markets correct and money's moving something, I don't know if it'll move the way it was, but something a little bit faster than the way it's moving now. And it will require just higher caliber operators and and those that had gaps and holes and don't correct them won't be here. And I think, and that will be painful for the space, but the other side of it will be better for it. And I think the way we show up as a mature vertical will will take us where we need to go and where we ultimately will get to. But it's part of how the space grows, and I've heard about it, in others as well. So the best operators will rise to the top, and the rest will go away. And hopefully, at the end of the day, it makes a better space.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, we're all here because we believe this will be one of the largest consumer categories in the U.S. I mean, last year there was $24 billion in legal sales with an industry that's not even federally legal. And so that's the long-term opportunity. And I think I'm constantly reminding our team that this is a moment in the industry, and it will probably be healthy for the industry because there's been a lot of jokers that have popped up in this industry that probably should be washed out, frankly.
The product will always be there and sold. It's just a matter of who's here to service it.
Yeah, so going to that, Ryan, you just said something around operational excellence, which I have a question for Artie about this. So Artie, when you come into a company and you start partnering with a founder, what are the things that you look at to help the company start operating at scale in a better way? I think there's a lot of companies out there right now that want to make it and they want to do the hard work and make the hard decisions, but they don't really know what to do or where to start, and they probably can't afford to bring in someone like you. So what kind of tips do you have for people that want to make it to the other side but don't really know where to start?
Yeah, I think, one of the things I always sort of like to do is just have the conversation around what's the vision for 36 months from now, and sort of work backwards from there. Like if you're like, look, we think we can 10x the business, or we want to, we think we need to add these products and services. We need to add these features. We need to, then you sort of look around the room and say, okay, like, do we have the product team, the engineering team, the marketing, team, the customer service team to do that? So there's that front on, like, let's start with the finish line and work backwards. And then, there's the things of like sort of day one where you walk in and you sort of say, okay, like, give me, the data on, today, like, why are our customers calling us? What are their issues? What are their problems? What are the things like we need to solve? And so you sort of saying like, okay, these things we need to handle right now, but then we need to think about building an organization and our systems and our processes and our people to basically keep up with the scale. And I think a lot of times what happens is, and I think companies got caught up in this in the last few years, was chasing, a growth rate. And the only way, frankly, to do that was like, we just throw more and more people at it. And then you wake up one day and, as Ryan said, like you're adding a person a day, or some companies, multiple people a day, because you haven't built like the foundational layer. And the only way to solve it is to throw more people at the problem. So again, it's more like, let's focus where we need to get to and build from that.
Well, we only have 10 minutes left. And of course I still have 3 questions for you. So I'm going to try to go quickly through these. It's been such a good conversation, but Vankst is a hiring business. And so I always ask everybody, what is the biggest hiring lesson that you've learned throughout your career? Ryan, let's start with you, and then we'll get the answer from Artie. Biggest hiring lesson that you've learned?
Related, the biggest firing lesson is the moment you think to yourself, this person shouldn't be here, they shouldn't be there, and that thought probably doesn't go away. So act faster. Fire faster.
Okay, number 1. Anything else?
That's it on my side. One thing I think we had challenges on too is like spending in, especially for like very senior partner roles, like spending time in person together. It's like impossible to really know somebody through just a Zoom process. Sounds simple, but like we're not that evolved.
Artie, what about you?
I think it's trying to match like what the company needs at that moment in time with like the person's skill set. If you're coming into a startup, the way I used to describe like, Time Warner Cable was like a Fortune 100 company. I described it as like a pretty house on a pretty street. And my job was basically like maintain the house, make sure like we stay in the neighborhood we're in. And like, it's a very different job of like, here's some plywood and some bricks and cement and go build something. And that go build something, like you really need people who know how to like get stuff done. And if you don't have people who can get stuff done, it's just not gonna work out. And so, for us, like I sort of always say, like, it's the people who, like, if I give them like, here's the issue, I need you to go off and solve this, that I can, know when they walk out of my office that they're going to come back with some plan. And, I think what has happened a bit right now when I look at sort of the startup world is I think a lot of people went into the startup world who people probably shouldn't be in the startup world. Like, startups are messy. They don't always go up and to the right. Startups go under, startups downsize, startups pivot. For the last several years, startups have paid both a lot of money in cash and a bunch of equity. And so people were like, this is great. Like, I have my cash and I have, basically some upside if the equity hits. And then I think people are sort of realizing, like, people who, got out of college in 2009 on, like, have kind of experienced the world going up and to the right, and that does not happen forever. And so again, I think what we've seen, and I think other companies are seeing, like, there's certain people who are sort of wired for this type of environment. I think one of the things that we're seeing too is people who are actually, excited of like, people are really getting back to what startups are about, like being scrappy, hungry, solving problems, getting stuff done, and moving forward. And so it's just like making sure, at a startup, you have those types of people.
Yeah, I think it's like dreamers versus doers. Like, that's what we always talk about. And I also completely agree with you that over the last decade, with interest rates being zero and money flowing into startups like never before, startups were basically just paying at the same rate as big companies. And so everybody was getting the best of both worlds in that, like, hardcore early days, you have to do this if you want to make payroll next month. That is somewhat disappeared. How can people that are running, and I'm asking this for myself because we kind of fell into this trap too, how can we, bring our culture back to reality of there isn't always going to be unlimited VC dollars, and this isn't like this like utopian place. This is a real business and we have to make money. What are the ways that you can, startups that have been operating in this fantasy world that now need to come back down to reality, what can people do to make that happen? Or is it just like, what can people do?
I think you just have to make sure you have the team around you who gets exactly where the company is and what has to be done. I mean, there are wartime CEOs and wartime employees, and there are peacetime CEOs and peacetime employees. I think what happened a lot in the world is we went from peacetime to wartime very quickly last year. And, you're seeing, I think, companies who are making sort of this hard pivot, but a necessary pivot. I think they will be the ones that sort of come out the other side of this super successful. But you just, everyone on that team's got to realize, like, we're in wartime.
Wartime. All right. And my last question here is, obviously we know that we're in wartime. It's going to be some hard times ahead, but what is the absolute thing that you're most excited about in your journey ahead at LeafLink? Ryan, let's start with you.
There are great companies and incredible founders and teammates in this space. And we've really gotten, as an industry, a bad rap. And I don't think we've done ourselves any favors. I'm most excited from our perspective as we continue to bring in amazing people like Artie and so many dozens of others on our team to set a standard for like what the industry is going to look like in the future as a polished, respectable, predictable space that isn't defined by things of a bygone era and assumptions that people used to make. I don't think we've done a good job at that. I don't think the companies that get the most attention or that are on public markets do that yet. I'd love to have us begin to like set that narrative and make it clear like who this industry is, who the best operators are, how we support them, and that's really the future of the cannabis vertical. That's super exciting to me.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's really about how this industry at the end of this decade looks in terms of like there's great consumer brands, there's great retail experiences, there have been great management teams that sort of have come into the space and built great technology companies, consumer companies. That the cannabis industry is seen as a place where like you go get great talent from that industry. I think right now what we're doing is like, as an industry, we're trying to recruit talent into the industry. I always say you always know as like a company when you hit it, when like folks are trying to poach your employees. I think when, other industries are showing up and sort of saying like, whether it's tech, whether it's consumer, whether it's retail, like look at what has been built there. And, like we've been really successful.
Well, thank you guys both so much for tuning in. If people are interested in working for LeafLink, you can go to vanks.com/LeafLink. There's a handful of jobs here, and we know there'll be many more jobs posted here. Great opportunity to get in with probably the most well-funded cannabis technology company in the space right now. So, Ryan, Artie, thank you so much for your time today, and excited to see what LeafLink gets done over the next year. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Carson.
Thank you.